Last time on Quiet Night. The physician Duban had been executed on the word of a jealous vizier. Before he died, he gave the king an ancient book and worked poison into every single page of it. The king licked his finger to turn each page and fell dead at the foot of his own throne. The fisherman finished his story. He looked at the sealed jar. The genie had heard everything, and the fisherman made his decision. He opened the jar. This is what the genie showed him. The fisherman held the jar for a long moment. He thought about Duban, about a king who destroyed the man who saved him and died for it. He thought about the genie's oath, sworn properly, on his true name. A genie's vow, once sworn, cannot be broken. That was what the genie had told him. He lifted the lead seal. The smoke poured out. It rose and gathered and became the enormous, terrifying shape he had hoped never to see again. The genie towered above him on the shore, looking down at the small old man who had outwitted him. Then the genie laughed. Not the cold, threatening sound from before. Something different. "I only kicked the jar into the sea to test you," the genie said, "to see if you would panic. You did not. Pick up your nets and follow me." The genie walked. The fisherman followed with his nets over his shoulder, and his heart still not entirely convinced this was going to end well. They passed through the town. They climbed a mountain. They crossed over the summit and descended into a wide plain on the other side, a place the fisherman had never been, had never heard of, had no idea existed despite having lived his whole life in the surrounding country. And there, cradled between four low hills, was a lake. The water was perfectly still, crystal clear, and in it, moving slowly through the depths, were fish, 4 colors: white, red, blue, and yellow, one of each, unlike anything the fisherman had ever pulled from any net in 40 years of fishing. He stared at them. The genie spoke. The genie looked at the fisherman. "Cast your nets," he said. "Catch your fish. Take them to the Sultan. He will pay you more than you have ever earned in a single day. Come back to this lake each day to fish. But listen carefully. Cast your nets only once per day. If you cast them more than once, something bad will happen to you. Follow this instruction, and you will live well." The fisherman cast his nets once. When he pulled them in, he had 4 fish, 1 white, 1 red, 1 blue, 1 yellow. He looked up to thank the genie. The genie was gone. The ground where he had been standing showed no sign that anything had ever stood there. The earth was smooth and unmarked. The fisherman gathered his fish and walked to the palace. The Sultan had never seen anything like them. He turned them over in his hands. He held them up to the light. He admired them for a long time in silence. "Fish this remarkable," he said finally, "must be as good as they look. Take them to the Greek cook who was sent to me as a gift by the Emperor of Greece. She is the finest cook in this palace." He ordered the fisherman to be paid 400 gold pieces. The fisherman, who had never held such a sum in his life, stood in the middle of the palace courtyard and stared at the coins in his hands. Then he went home and took care of everything his family needed. Every debt, every empty shelf, everything that had been wrong for 40 years, in one morning. In the kitchen, the cook cleaned the 4 strange fish and laid them in a pan with oil to fry. When the cook judged the fish done enough on one side, she turned them over in the pan. The moment she did, the wall of the kitchen split open. Through the gap stepped a young woman. strikingly beautiful, dressed in Egyptian satin of richly flowered design. She wore pearl earrings, a pearl necklace, gold bracelets set with rubies, and she carried a slender wand of myrtle wood in her hand. She walked straight to the pan. The cook stood frozen. She could not speak, could not move, could not do anything except watch. The woman lowered her wand toward the fish.
Fish, fish, are you doing your duty?
The fish said nothing. She asked again. This time all 4 fish raised their heads from the pan together and answered clearly, in unison.
Yes, yes. If you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we conquer, and we are content.
The moment they finished speaking, the woman overturned the pan. The fish fell into the ashes. She turned and walked back through the gap in the wall. The wall closed behind her as if it had never parted. The cook stared at the pan. The fish were burnt black, completely ruined, unfit to serve to anyone. She began to weep. When the Grand Vizier came in to ask if the fish were ready, she told him everything, every word of it. He did not believe her, but he sent immediately for the fisherman and asked him to bring 4 more fish, explaining only that an accident had occurred. The fisherman returned the next morning with 4 more fish, one of each color as before. He had gone to the lake at night, cast his nets once as instructed, and drawn them up exactly as the genie had promised. This time the vizier took the fish to the kitchen himself. He locked the door. He stood and watched as the cook prepared them exactly as before. When she turned them in the pan, the wall opened again. The same young woman stepped through, dressed as before, carrying her wand of myrtle. She approached the pan, spoke the same words, received the same answer from the fish, overturned the pan, and vanished back through the wall, which sealed itself shut behind her. The vizier had seen it with his own eyes. He went directly to the Sultan and told him everything. The Sultan wanted to see this for himself. He sent for the fisherman a 3rd time. He asked for 4 more fish and granted the fisherman 3 days to return with them. This time, when the fish arrived, the Sultan had them carried to his own private chamber. He and the Grand Vizier prepared and cooked them together with their own hands. When the Vizier turned them in the pan, the wall opened. But this time what stepped through was not the young woman. An enormous figure stepped through the gap. A man, if it could be called a man, terrifyingly tall, carrying a thick green stick. He struck the fish with it and spoke in a voice that filled the entire room.
Fish, fish, are you doing your duty?
The fish raised their heads from the pan and answered exactly as they had before. Yes, yes, if you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we conquer, and we are content. The figure overturned the pan. The fish turned to cinders. Then he stepped back through the wall, which sealed itself shut. The Sultan stood in the middle of the room, looking at the ashes on the floor. He was the most powerful man in his kingdom. He controlled armies, treasuries, and the lives of millions of people. And he had just watched something walk through a solid wall, destroy 4 fish in a pan, and walk back through the same wall. And he had been entirely unable to do anything about it. These fish are hiding a mystery, he said quietly, and I will not rest until I understand it. And Scheherazade paused. The candle burned low. The palace was still. The Sultan lay in the dark, thinking about fish that spoke, walls that opened, and a lake no one had ever found that sat hidden behind a mountain 3 hours from his own palace. He thought about a fisherman who had stumbled into all of this by pulling a copper jar from the sea on his 4th cast of the net. He thought about what the Sultan in the story was about to do next. He did not reach for the blade. "Next time," Scheherazade said softly, "I will tell you what the Sultan found when he went looking for the answer. And what he found was not what he expected." Dawn was beginning at the edges of the window. The Sultan closed his eyes and spared her one more day.